I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Lance Velchek here, for Arrow in the Head's The Fucking Black Sheep, where we take a look at the opposing opinion of the genre's most divisive films. Winter is here. Times like these, I always like to revisit something winter-themed, so I'd like to look back at an amazing tale told by the master himself, Stephen King. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is near perfect, with the iconic casting of Jack fucking Nicholson. A film that is so quintessential that it's birthed constant analysis and numerous conspiracy theories. And though I love and agree with everything said about 1980's The Shining, I must confess, I also have a secret affection for another. The 1997 miniseries, The Shining. Now, most of you, I assume, may be too young to remember it, but back in the day, a Stephen King miniseries was no joke. These were events. These brought families together. Now, there were only two things that got my whole family together for a night of television: a Stephen King miniseries and Married with Children.
Fat woman Godzilla's into the shoe store today. Asked for something she could wear to walk in the woods. Jokingly, I suggest she wear a sign that says, "Don't shoot from the front, I look human."
You hurt her and I'll hit you so fucking hard your dog will bleed, okay?
Ed O'Neill is a goddamn American treasure. So in 1997, Stephen King did the unthinkable and had his most famous film readapted for the small screen. It's no secret that King was not a fan of Kubrick's interpretation. He has publicly spoken out against it for the better part of the last 4 decades.
Did you like Kubrick's film of The Shining?
No. Cold.
To enjoy the miniseries, we need to step away from the classic. The general story is the same. Jack, Wendy, and Danny Torrance spend the winter as caretakers for the Overlook Hotel. The miniseries spends the better half of part 1 setting up Jack as a flawed man who can't quite shake his demons. This winter gig is his last chance. Jack's drinking led him to attack a student, which cost him his career. With bills piling up, this is the end of the road. Mick Garris and Stephen King really fleshed out Jack's need for this job. It's his savior.
I really need this job.
Steven Weber had to follow Jack Nicholson. My guy from Wings had to follow the legendary Jack Nicholson. Our only thought should have been, sorry for your loss. But son of a bitch if he didn't give it everything. Weber is believable as a down on his luck family man.
You are a beneficiary of our politically correct times, Mr. Carnes.
I was on what the old-timers like to call a dry drunk. A bad one.
His dramatic turn is impressive. Not the dude you'd think would be a great Nicholson understudy, but people were wrong. We were wrong. There is a bit of nuance as you can see that he's not eternally awful, but just weak and susceptible. With the miniseries format being 3 parts, the slower descent feels more earned. Jack's budding obsession with the Overlook Hotel's violent past, full of suicides and mob hits, his short temper and growing suspicion of his son, his loss of interest in his wife.
Maybe I could use some caretaking, too.
What are you talking about?
Now, Jack, kill or kidnap as many kids as the hotel demands, but Rebecca de Mornay when she asks. Don't be rude. This is more of a traditional ghost story, and in line with the novel. Kubrick had the ghost elements as well, but the miniseries puts the hotel's influence front and center. I always love a good ghost story, and for the time period, format, and budget, this was executed quite well. Simple things like the chairs falling over or the sweeping shots of the dark rooms and walkways can be a little creepy. Instead of the hedge maze brilliantly used in the film, this uses the novel's hedge animals as sort of sentient guardians. At first, these are used effectively. They are possessed by the Overlook to mess with people, shifting and moving. The idea that it's just using them as mind games is great, as they could never be threatening, just edging closer once you turn away. Fantastic. It just pushes Jack further into madness, but once they become CGI and mobile, you've lost me. When Wendy cracks his head open and the blood splatter dries on his face, it's such a great look. This is my favorite choice they made here. Jack's physical features have now changed. I'm actually a bit nervous for Danny when he's being chased at the end. I must give credit to Mick's effort and grace. I'll give Rebecca De Mornay props for her take on Wendy Torrance. I never hated Shelley Duvall's version, but I didn't love her either. The constant screaming and crying was a bit much, but overall it did fit the tone of the film. Rebecca played the role with more confidence and had a protective relationship with her son due to Jack's abusive nature. I do wish we could have expanded on their rocky relationship more and could have used a few more flashbacks, but she does well regardless. And to be honest, I still haven't really forgiven her for what she did to Ernie Hudson.
Don't fuck with me, retard. My version of the story will be better.
He was a good man, Potts. A good man. Chicago's own sweetback himself, Melvin Van Peebles, plays head cook Dick Halloran, and I have to say, I like him better than Scatman, but only a little. Hey, look at that, a Sam Raimi cameo, which would explain the Deadite. Plus, when he's in Florida flirting with the waitstaff, dancing to oldies, and wearing ridiculous clothes, that's future me, that's my goal. As much as I enjoy this version, there are more than a few drawbacks. Danny's imaginary friend Tony is visualized here as the most dorky 90s kid ever. I like the idea of Tony being an actual character, instead of an annoying finger, but the ball was really dropped with this execution. If Clarissa Explains It All had a ghost, Tony would be it. Though cinematic for its time, it could have done so much more with a better budget, and a few F-bombs would have added a lot.
Let's see you pull a few of your tricks now.
Listen, I know acting is tough, and who am I? Who am I to criticize? But Cortland Mead, great name, was terrible. I'm sure he's a nice dude, but this was rough. It was very, very rough.
I broke a piece of your car. I'm sorry, please don't tell my dad. He could get mad.
We then time jump many years later with a charming Coda. An older Wendy and Halloran are at Danny's graduation. After a life-altering event, it's good to see that Dick and Wendy have become close friends. An innocent kid had an intense, traumatic experience, and to show him healthy and moving on with a new quartet, if you will, is great. Tony ends up being an older version of Danny Torrance. He was trying to prevent the tragedy and eventually save his younger self. Jack's spirit shows up to say he loves and is proud of him. I don't care who you are, if you've ever lost a parent or someone important, then you should understand why this is beautiful. And though this execution was a bit clunky, you can clearly see the whys behind it, and for that, I'll always cheer it on. Dark tales can have moving endings that add to the story. 11/22/63 had Jake dance with his true love, who'd never know of their life. But in that moment, nothing else mattered.
We had a happy life.
Look at the masterpiece that is The Haunting of Hill House. When Hugh sacrifices himself to save his kids so that they could move on and finally live, that was the closure I needed. Be kind to each other.
And nothing else. Be kind.
Stop cutting onions. They both gave their lives for their family, and a sweet reminder of the bond between a father and his kids. I will always argue in favor of Heart. You can enjoy the Shining miniseries on its own merit without strictly comparing to its 1980 counterpart. To attempt something like this in the late 90s, with the limitations of broadcast television, will always be front and center, and something some might not see past. If you can accept the inadequacies of primetime TV, you get a cool little ghost story that deals with the perils of alcoholism and the demons that accompany it. Plus, I'm glad I got to experience a time where King's stories were adapted solely to keep the cast of Wings employed. You charming son of a bitch. You'll always be Antonio to me.
JoBlo, he sure likes to drink a lot.
It's me they want. Me.